The small town of Frost Hollow had always been picturesque during Christmas. Blankets of snow covered the streets and homes glowed with warm lights, their chimneys puffing out smoke into the crisp winter air. People gathered in town squares to sip hot cocoa, and children eagerly awaited Santa's visit. But this Christmas, something felt wrong. It started with the children's laughter. It was too loud, too shrill. Parents brushed it off, blaming the excitement of the holiday. But something in the air was different. The town had always been peaceful, and yet whispers of strange happenings began to trickle through the streets. It was Emily, a local school teacher, who first noticed the oddities. Her children, her dear, innocent children, had become distant. They no longer ran to her after school, their faces no longer lit with excitement over the season. They simply stared at the windows, the light in their eyes dimmed, as if they were waiting for something. On Christmas Eve, Emily stayed up late, trying to get the last of her holiday preparations done. She wrapped gifts, baked gingerbread cookies, and listened to the howling wind outside. A soft knock on the door startled her. Emily. "Who could be visiting at this hour?" she muttered, wiping flour from her hands as she made her way to the door. When she opened it, there was no one there, just a small weathered card on the ground. She bent down and picked it up. It was a simple image, a silhouette of a reindeer, its antlers twisted into sharp, devilish points. Beneath it, in red ink, it read, Emily's heart skipped. She shook the card thinking it was some sick prank, but something about it felt real. The wind howled again, this time colder, as if it had a life of its own. The night stretched on and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her. She turned off the lights in her living room and pulled her curtains shut, but when she walked past the window, she froze. In the distance, the outline of a sleigh could be seen, but this was no ordinary sleigh. It was black as coal, its frame covered in patches of frost. And the sound, the jingle of bells, but they were far too deep, too menacing, like the tolling of a bell in a forgotten graveyard. A shadow moved inside the sleigh, but it wasn't the familiar shape of Santa Claus. No, this was something else entirely, something much darker. A figure clad in tattered red robes with fur trim, but his skin was as pale as the moon, and his eyes, those eyes were pools of black ink, empty and endless. The sleigh stopped in front of her house. The doorbell rang. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had no choice but to answer. Standing there was the figure she had seen in the sleigh. The man, or whatever he was, smiled, his lips curling unnaturally as he showed jagged teeth. Figure. "Ho ho ho! I've come for the children." Without thinking, Emily slammed the door shut, but the sound of claws scraping against wood made her heart pound in her chest. The figure outside wasn't alone. She heard them, thousands of them, scratching, tapping, circling, tiny hands, tiny claws, skittering like rats. Emily ran to her children's room. They were there, sitting on their beds, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. They weren't asleep. They never slept anymore. The town's curse had already begun to take its toll on them. "Lily! Mom! He's here! He's coming!" "Emily! Who is?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. Lily smiled, but it wasn't her smile, it was something twisted. "Lily, Satan's claws. They're inside us!" Before Emily could react, the door flew open. The figure stood in the doorway, his dark presence filling the room. His red robes were now stained with something black, something foul. His eyes locked onto Emily's, and she felt the weight of them, like they were pulling her into an endless abyss. But the figure didn't approach her. No, he turned to the children. His long black claws reached out, and Emily's scream got stuck in her throat. The children didn't fight it. They didn't even flinch as Satan's claws took hold of them, wrapping around their tiny arms, digging into their skin, marking them. And just as quickly as they had been taken, they were changed. Their faces twisted with monstrous joy as they turned to Emily. Their eyes, those glowing, endless eyes, locked with hers. "Children, we're not your children anymore, Mom. We belong to him now." With a sickening sound, the figure yanked his claws from their bodies. He stepped backward, his laughter shaking the walls of the house. "Figure, the children are mine. This Christmas they all belong to me." As Emily fell to her knees, the figure turned and walked toward the door. He didn't need to open it, the shadows parted for him. The sleigh waited outside, drawn by creatures with glowing red eyes and twisted antlers. Figure. Remember, you invited me in. Your town's greed, your forgotten prayers, have opened the door for me. Now I'll take what's mine. The door slammed shut, and the house fell into complete silence. The wind died down, the snow outside began to settle, but the shadows that lingered in the corners of the room would never leave. The next morning, Frost Hollow was quiet, as if nothing had happened. The Christmas lights twinkled across the streets, bright and merry. The townsfolk went about their holiday, unaware that a darkness had claimed their children, and that Satan's claws now lurked in their midst, waiting for the next Christmas Eve to claim what was his.